Hey, the left-handed right winger again, and just going to continue on as I know we talked about George Washington. Now we're going to move on to John Adams. Yeah, John Adams. It's interesting where he comes into play um, because he had served as George Washington's vice president for 2 terms, and he hated the gig. And not very many people like being vice president, but isn't it because he had his claim to fame because he's the first to draft the Declaration of Independence. He um, he passed off the work of writing it to Thomas Jefferson, but he was really a strong advocate for the American Revolution. He really, thought it was the best thing for us to break away, start doing things on our own. Didn't like how Great Britain was treating us, so he was the big guy behind all of that. Um, and so, of course, the first election came out and said, well, the first real election, I should say, because it technically was a meeting of the Electoral College to get George Washington in for his 2 terms president. But John Adams and Thomas Jefferson went head to head in 1796. Um, I don't know where to who of who George Washington supported because I think he had his thoughts on both guys because he had Adams as his vice president and he had Thomas Jefferson as the Secretary of State, so he really could have no opinion on either one of them. But he he didn't say anything about it. But it was a bloody campaign. They threw some of the worst stuff at each other. I think John Adams went in with an edge because he had a little more visibility as vice president because it was still a pretty close election overall, and John Adams got it. And John Adams, he started out, pretty good. And the idea that he was the big guy, the father of the Navy, he brought out the Navy though in part because, as I mentioned too, there was a whole under Washington. There still was going on this whole war between France and Britain, and they both of us wanted to get in on their side. Either France or Britain, they both really wanted us. Um, and the French tried to subject us to a bribe, and it wasn't taken very well. We didn't like it, and a lot of us thought about declaring war. And even that's where Adams built the Navy for that reason. But being our Navy and our military was still so small at the time, and we barely been a country, for maybe 20 years. Debatably, we don't through the American Revolution go back to the 1770s, but really, we hadn't really had our own government, our own establishment, running things our own way. We had the Articles Confederation, 1783, but we didn't have a constitution until 1787. So, and mind you, this is 1797, 98. It's barely 10 years out, actually. So we're really playing with fire. But a lot of people called him a coward for not going to war. But he did build up the Navy in the process. So plus there, but that quickly fell apart because he supported and passed the Alien and Sedition Act, and they, and there's a lot of problem with that. The Alien Act. It was better two of them. Two, this Alien Act and the Sedition Act. They're often lumped together because they're the two that brought down his presidents because they were tied together. But the alien part of it, I'm not as opposed to because the big thing was it was to keep foreigners from coming into the country and denouncing incoming presidents or interfering in our politics. So in some ways, I don't think they can say what they want, but they shouldn't be involving themselves in it, nor should they be, um, basically if they want to be a part of this country. Some of that I can see, it shouldn't happen. So fine. Where it gets, where the other part of the Sedition Act was bad, and this is something that feels like it's going on. It's going to start going on today, and it's gone here and there throughout history. But the idea that you can't speak out against the government if you oppose the government, you oppose the incumbent party. No, you pretty much were arrested. And there were people that were arrested for speaking out for that, and it made it very difficult for Thomas Jefferson to run against Adams in 1800, which luckily he won because of that. But it really his John Adams' support of the Sedition Act really put a taint on him that he's not really a guy for freedom. That he doesn't really care about freedom of speech. He wants to be able to protect his view and the view of the government, and really didn't do much to protect that. So that's why very much why he became one-term president. It's a shame because he was a decent guy. He's a relative of mine. Very distant. I'm not sure if he's aunt, uncle, whatever, but he's way down the line related to me. Um, And it's just a shame though that everything fell apart for him in that way. Um, I mean, he did later go on to become revered as a statesman. No, remembered as being a former president. I don't think he's fallen as sharply, even though I don't think he's rated very highly among former presidents. But he's even after his presidency, he's still remembered. Hey, he's John Adams. He was the signer of the Declaration of Independence. He was former president. I don't think he ever really got. I mean, for the time, for a long time, he was probably the worst president we ever had. But that wasn't really. I mean, that really wasn't much to say. We really hadn't had that many bad guys, and he wasn't really that bad either. Um, and it's interesting too because this whole political thing made him enemies with Thomas Jefferson. The two of them became very, very close towards the end too, when they started talking and chatting a lot. They come very, very close before their deaths. But well, that's that. Um, I think in the end, John Adams ends up in the 20s when we're done. Maybe the end mid to end 20s as far as overall. For a while, he's going to be in like second, third place as the ranking until we get this series through to the end. So anyway, that's my thoughts on John Adams, and stay tuned for Thomas Jefferson.